manuscript about the seduction theory, and here I want to say from the beginning that seduction theory, I really define it the way Freud defined it at the beginning, and I think the true definition has gotten lost in time. Namely, Freud, the theory states that adults can develop psychopathology only if they had been exposed to sexual abuse before the age of 10. And now I think one claims that Freud denied that sexual abuse or seduction occurs or that it doesn't occur frequently, whereas he did not mean a statistical law, but a fact, a genetic law. That must happen, and if it doesn't happen, an adult is safe of psychopathology. And we know today that that is, of course, wrong. There's no doubt. It's not necessary to dispute. I felt ashamed when in my manuscript I presented some cases that were never exposed to sexual abuse and still they developed severe psychopathology. Now, in the course of preparing that manuscript, I had to study a few letters of Freud, and since the Sigmund Freud Heritage, Literary Heritage Foundation is so interested in letters, I thought it would be proper if I tell you a few experiences I made. That's the so important letter in the whole question of seduction theory is the letter of 21st September 1897, where Freud tells Fliess that he has that the neurotica is wrong, and he presents it with 8 arguments, and so are described as not sufficient or not really conveying, giving sufficient reason for dropping that theory. I think the 8 arguments are splendid, which I will not go into them here. I would like very much, because I think they are so crystal clear and so logical. And particularly the 8th argument, when he says the seduction theory, I will never be able to, one cannot explain or find the etiology of neurosis. And what he really meant is the seduction theory, with the seduction theory one can't do that. And he was right. A traumatic theory alone cannot explain very much. And at that time, we did not know that 9 years later he will have also a theory of development. A theory of development plus a theory of trauma, I think, gets us pretty far in finding etiological reasons of neurosis. Now, in that letter of September 1897, a quotation from the Bible is used. Freud writes that he will not announce in the streets of Dan and of Ashkelon his defeat. And what he wanted to convey to Fliess was that it's discreet, confidential. He will not talk about it publicly. And why he waited 9 years before he publicly announced it is an interesting question which I think can be answered. The interesting thing is that he made a mistake in the Bible. It doesn't say Dan, but Gath. I will not. David says after the defeat of Saul, who took his life, and after the killing, after his favorite friend Jonathan was killed, he said it should not reach the Philistine. It would give them courage. That is what he meant, David, when he said, don't announce it in Gath and in Ashkelon. Now, why did Freud make that mistake? He knew the saying of Gath and Ashkelon very well. because he used that phrase several years earlier when he wrote his friend Carla, the ophthalmologist. He wrote him that he did not want to study pharmacology the evening before his exam, but then the ridicule or something like that, the scorn, the ridiculing scorn of Gath and Ashkelon frightened him so much that he studied 10 hours and he passed the examination. Dan appears in the Bible usually in the saying from Dan to Beersheba. It's a geographical term to characterize that the whole country of the Israelites participated in the event that is to be described, whereas Gath and Ashkelon are the citadels of Philistine power, something quite different, and it is not probable that it was just sloppiness that Freud made that mistake. If one checks on the events that are associated in the Bible with Dan, there are terrible things that happen. One was that God told David to number the people, and David said it's a sin, but God said he has to do it. And so the people from Dan to Beersheba gathered, and the numbering was carried out. And since it was sinful, and terrible pestilence spread, and thousands of Israelites were killed. Or once it happens that a Benjamite in the tribal area of the Benjamites that was around Dan, a very nasty crime was committed that offended the whole nation. So the people from Dan to Beersheba gathered, and there was a long fight with the Benjamites, and nearly all of them were exterminated or killed. So you see quite terrible things happened in connection with Dan. But Saul's defeat and the catastrophes I mentioned in connection with them are quite different. That Saul was killed and Jonathan was killed, that Saul took his life and Jonathan was killed, after all made it possible for David to become king. And although he lamented the event, it was a terrible blow to him, but in the long run it opened the way for his kingship. Whereas the catastrophes in connection with Dan to Beersheba were just terrible, they were useless, they were a waste, they did not lead to anything. And I think that Freud was, which he also mentioned, preoccupied the terrible defeat I now suffered by having to evoke my favorite theory. Is it a final defeat or is it only an episode? Do new things wait for me, or do I have to reconcile myself of having been definitely defeated? The answer to that we may come closer if we turn towards another quotation in that letter where Freud says